Hi, everyone. Welcome to our live Facebook parenting series entitled Help, My Kids Are Going Crazy. Today, I'm Dr. Lisa Konick. I am a clinical psychologist and owner of Konick and Associates, which is a family and child behavioral health clinic in both Naperville and Orland Park. And we started this series as a result of the events going on related to COVID and a lot of the sheltering in place. And a lot of our families expressed a need for supports and resources to help them deal with child management and educational concerns. And today I have with me Wanda Malone of Wanda Malone Educational Advocacy Services. And I'm going to introduce Wanda. She's going to be talking to us today about special education concerns as a result of remote learning. And Wanda is a friend and longtime colleague of mine, and I'm pleased to have her speaking with us today. I'm going to talk a little bit about Wanda, and then I'm going to hand it over to her. Please feel free to put questions. We'll be happy to answer those questions as we go along today. Wanda is a bilingual IEP coach and advocate. She is also a special needs mom. She has two boys, aged 15 and 16, and her 16-year-old has autism and ADHD. Wanda has been an active member of the special needs community. Through her IEP journey, she has been helping special needs families navigate the education process. Wanda provides many valuable resources, both personal and professional input, and being a special needs parent herself, she's able to connect to the families on issues that they are facing in the school system. Wanda's Facebook page has a wealth of resources, and she continues to provide supports even during these difficult times. In 2009, Wanda was the implementer of the gluten-free menu in School District 204, and at that time, this was the first school district to offer such a menu. In addition to these educational and advocacy activities, Wanda also runs a nonprofit, the Autism Family Foundation, which provides families with resources and also sponsors a special needs holiday event every December. She has been hosting this amazing event for 9 years. So welcome, Wanda. We are pleased to have you. We will certainly make sure that you have connections to Wanda on our Facebook page, and we will also share them here. So Wanda, please talk to us a bit about your experiences with the remote learning. And just for our viewers today, we are having a little technical issues. So please post if you're having a difficult time hearing us along the process. Notice there's a little lag in the video. If it gets choppy, we'll be happy to repeat ourselves to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Lisa, for having me. I'm so happy to be joining you in this parent series. As a parent myself, I'm in the trenches, so I get exactly what all the clients or the families are feeling. It's not an easy process. It's mentally overwhelming. Obviously, as an IEP coach and advocate, I've been providing a lot of resources as well. But the biggest thing that I wanted to bring to everyone is, I've said this before, this is new for everyone, not only us parents, but the schools, the district, the teachers. And what I want to make sure the families know is that we're all in this together, and we want to make sure that we have that open communication. I know by now, obviously through this pandemic and COVID, and we've been, kind of enclosed, nobody wants to hear the we are in it together anymore, but it really is. We have to keep in mind that we are all in this and we've never been through something like this. So open communication with your team at this point, it's going to be really, really critical. And even if the teachers don't know, they may tell you that, but ask them for help. I mean, if we are at home and doing e-learning has been a struggle for all of us. We at home are parents. We're not educators. Even if they're educators, I've talked to a lot of people that are teachers themselves, the home is not the school environment. So it's really difficult to recreate that environment. So it's really important that we remember that we're going to do the best we can, but it is not easy. I know that. But I think the biggest thing is making sure parents can communicate to this team, ask them for resources or help. Facebook, go out to the parent groups and see what others are doing. One of the things that my 16-year-old has autism and ADHD, and he is going to be a junior this year. So when we started, it was a little hard, but he got into a swing of things. However, I'm not a reading specialist, and one of his big goals is reading and math. These are functional skills, right? He's going to be graduating in a couple years. So what I decided to do, instead of wrecking my brain and trying to implement the IEP as if I was the teacher, I started implementing functional skills. And what does that look like for my son as an example? Well, he likes to cook. So he would want to do, let's say, pancakes. And he would have to look at the recipe. He would have to get all the ingredients. He would have to measure them. So not only is he using reading, he's using really functional skills, but math, because he has to stay on track. He really can't sidetrack, because if he puts 2 eggs or too much milk or not enough flour, he's not going to have pancakes that are going to be good. So there's a lot of embedded, to me, functional skills that have been better for us. Now he's 16. For a younger kid, you may not be able to do something like that, but there are other things that you can do. And I've seen a lot of suggestions like folding laundry, helping. Kids love to help, right? So we can sort the colors of the shirt, whether if they're shirts or pants. Now, again, you're using in the ABA world, they use this a feature function class. So what do you use? What is this? These are pants. Where do we wear the pants? Do we wear shorts or long pants when it's summer or hot? So there's ways that we have to, as parents, just be a little bit creative. I've noticed that a lot on YouTube, there's a lot of resources and suggestions, but I think the biggest thing is open communication and not stressing. Now, I know summer, right? Because that was when we hit.
That was one of our questions, Wanda, is we've had a lot of families that have said, you know, my kids are having gaps in their learning now, and they're very anxious about not being special educators, having a lot of behavioral disruption when they're trying to implement the school structure or getting their kids on Zoom. And the younger kids, older kids are able to handle it, as you probably have. There's some variation, but maybe tolerate it a bit more. The younger kids on Zoom, meetings with parents and teachers, or meetings with their teachers and classmates, has not always gone ideally. We've had a lot of kids crawling under the table and crying, and just parents are feeling like, what can I do to get them to sit and learn? And we've talked about structure last week in our parenting series. And what I've been telling you, and I got this tip from you too, is really looking at the functional skills, Wanda, but also how do we think about the gaps in learning and how we're going to, because we can't implement the IEP at home. We're not reading or math specialists. So and some of the kids will have extended school year, but some of those extended school years are going to also be remote learning, which the younger kids are not really connecting to as well as some of the older kids might. So I would be interested in hearing from your interactions with the schools and your expertise as an advocate, Wanda. What are you suggesting parents think about as they think about those gaps over summer? Not everybody can afford a tutor, but what are the options that they might have?
Sure. So one of the things that I also mentioned to families is document everything. And the reason I say this is get a notebook, and if Johnny has 10 minutes of reading and he is struggling, notate that. Really keep a really extensive log. How much have you tried? And when it comes to if their behaviors, record him. Record to make sure we have, and it's not just because we're doing that despite, it's just, this is data collection. So when the kids are in the school, that's what the school does. Now we're at home, so we need to show the school that there is a gap in services. The kid has regressed. The only way that we can prove that is going to be by documented a log or video. So it's really important that we have that. The other thing that I would say with the summer school, it's really hard to do anything, right? Especially because the kids are burned out. I mean, I'm burned out. When you talk about even DJ, my son, towards the end, he didn't want to do Zoom, and I didn't fight him. I'm like, fine. I would email the teacher and said, I'm sorry, DJ doesn't want to be on Zoom today. What can I do? I am not going to put myself or him through that struggle. I'm sorry. It's not going to be good for him or for me. So you have to pick your battles, but I think important to really look at where are the key areas that you're concerned and communicate to the team. These are my key concerns. How can we support them? So really, again, open communication and have a plan. If the plan is not working, feel free to email your case manager, the team, even though summer school kids, the administration is there. So you can email your special ed department and say, these services are not appropriate for my child. What other supports can my child receive? Now, obviously, that is going to open another door, but it is not something you can't request, because parents have to understand that if the child is not learning and they're regressing, it's going to get worse, right? That gap is going to continue to expand. So we want to stay ahead of it. Now, if you want, you can request a tutor. I don't know that the district will pay for it at this point, but there has to be a paper trail. We have to document what things we have done at home, what hasn't worked, and then that is going to be our data collection for the fall to possibly then request additional supports. Does that make sense? I think with summer school, again, my son has not done summer schools for years because it's a maintaining of skills, and I just feel like we have done a lot more functional things. Use the opportunity to try and help the kids in the community if you can. If you have access to ABA, if you have access to respite, use that person to help you break those skills down and remove yourself from doing that. You can do a lot of play-based things to still teach the kids, and they think it's fun because it's a new person, whether it's out in the backyard. I mean, there's so many things, just really thinking outside of the box. We as parents are burned out. So sometimes bring in someone else to say, hey, can you help Johnny for 2 hours, a day and work on these things? There's things that we can do. It's not easy. We just have to think outside of the box. Plus, it gives the parents a break. Again, if you have access to that, that's going to be my biggest recommendation for this summer. And that's what I've been telling a lot of families that have asked me on Facebook and on the pages.
We actually have, I can relate to that in our client base, Wanda. We have a number of families who there's so much tension between parent-child when it comes to academics. And as a mom with the deals with the special needs community, you might be able to relate to that especially kids on the autism spectrum, that compartmentalization of school versus home. Kids don't want to do schoolwork at home when they have a very compartmentalized way of thinking. And we have a lot of families in our practice who are dealing with, how do my kid is a bear to work with when it comes to homework. They don't want to do homework. They think school is at school, home is for home, and they want to kind of have those two areas be very distinct. And so a lot of families, what we've recommended is, hey, you know what, hire a teenager in your area to come in and do homework with your kid. It will be a break from you. They're interacting with a peer buddy or a mentor, and they are going to relate much better to that individual versus those power struggles that you're having as a parent, because you have so many other parenting related conflict to deal with, along with, take the school piece out of it if you can. Absolutely. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Absolutely. I think we, again, as parents, because if we look at the fall, right, we don't even know what's going to happen in the fall. And we'll talk about that. But even if we still stay in remote learning, if it's not appropriate for the child, then we need to really look and talk to the school to figure out what other resources are available to really meet that child's unique needs. But we have to think outside of the box, because I couldn't work with DJ all the time because that's just not something he wants. So you have to bring an outside person. And I love the idea you gave of a teenager. I mean, what a great way. It's a win-win for both, right? So being creative. Summer school is going to be challenging because it's only 6 weeks. The other thing that's really challenging for our kids that we didn't talk about is our kids always like to have closure. That was the biggest thing for DJ. On the last day of school, he was very sad because he was not able to say bye to his teachers and bye to his friends. That's a huge component because they need closure. Now something else starts, but now it's all blending together, right? There's no end or start to anything we're doing. So we have to visualize and put something, whether it's a visual schedule for our kids, so they understand that this is summer, like maybe, you know, you put a beach ball or a pool or whatever it is, but you have to put visuals to make sure they understand, because it is an abstract concept. Even DJ, it's hard to understand why we're doing virtual learning. He doesn't understand. What does that mean? So I explained to him why, but a lot of kids may not. So we have to use a visual schedule to show the end and the beginning. Like what is starting next and how long are you doing summer school for? And maybe make it a challenge in a game with the younger kids. I used to do this with mine, is a schedule. So they had, you know, 6 weeks. They would X out every day so they knew how long they had. The biggest thing with homework is, and I think you and I, Lisa, have talked about this, is really making sure, again, with the youngers is different. I don't make it a power struggle anymore. When we had e-learning before school ended, we would look at Chromebook, what was needed to be done. Okay, DJ, these are the things that you need to get done. What would you like to work on first? And when would you like to work on it? And really, that's what I did, because I'm not going to get in a power struggle, because it's not going to work for either him or I.
Right. And I think it's a natural consequence. You know, a lot of our kids really do want to please their teachers. They don't want to be embarrassed in front of their peers. And they don't want to go to school unprepared, but they're not as stressed about disappointing their parents. Right. So that natural consequence of setting up, you know, giving them some control in the decision making can be very helpful. And then also reminding them, you know, I've even said to parents, write down in their assignment notebook that if you refuse to do the work, then you're going to write to the teacher and say, he refused to do the work. And they have to be accountable then to the teacher. So that's another strategy that we've used behaviorally to really encourage kids to be accountable for their workload.
Absolutely. I had a situation where DJ had told me, I can't remember the time, but he wanted to do something at 5:30. And I'm like, okay, fine. So at 5:30 passes around, because he's to tell me, right? I'm trying, and again, he's 16. So I'm trying to teach him some accountability and responsibility, but he also has ADHD. So at 5:15, I texted him. I said, don't forget, we have 15 minutes to do homework. So he forgot. And then by the time he told me, it was maybe 6:30 or 7. And I said, you know what, bud? I'm not doing homework now. It's way past the time. So now you can email the teacher and tell her that you're not able to complete it, that you're going to do it tomorrow. And he was really not upset, but disappointed, but it never happened again. So he stuck to the schedule because, again, he wanted to make sure he did things and turn it in on time. So again, it's just having some accountability, but just think about all of that I just put in there is accountability, you know, teaching them, because again, these are independent skills he's going to need in the future.
Thank you, Wanda. The other thing that I noticed that maybe we could talk about a bit, 2 pieces of the IEP process, and you do support a lot of families, and maybe you could talk about how you support families through the IEP process. But we have 2 kind of conflicting pieces here. One is we have some families that are worried about their IEP needs being met based on going back to school. How do we get the supports in place given all the challenges we've had with the remote learning and the gaps in learning? And we're doing a transition and we haven't had closure, and kids are transitioning from elementary to middle school now without that meeting in place where they actually got to physically go and meet with the new team. And that process was, which normally would take place, is a bit rattled. There's families that we're talking to that are going into the new school year with an IEP that we're concerned about being supported. And the second set of circumstances is people that are just coming in for testing because they want to explore IEPs for next year, but they haven't been in the IEP system yet, or the special education system yet. So would you speak to those kind of aspects?
Sure. So the first one, obviously, with the ones with the IEPs and 504s, the biggest thing that I'm telling families is the present levels of performance in the IEP is so critical, right? Because it drives the goals and it drives where we're going. But where the kid was in March and where the kid is now and where he or she's going to be in the fall is so different. Yeah. So the biggest thing is, again, continue to do data collection at home. And what I mean by that, I don't want you going freaking out collecting. Just write down 15 minutes struggle of reading, whatever it may be. Take videos. Videos are very, very helpful. If we go back to school face to face, there has to be a point of evaluation, because the present levels of performance are going to be so different. So I think that the school systems are aware of that, and we as parents have to be aware, making sure we have a communication plan in place to make sure that that happens within the first couple of weeks of school. Mm-hmm. It's important because that IEP is probably going to be changing completely. So it's really important. And I know it's going to be a struggle for the special education departments, because that's going to happen, and they know that. The ones that do not have an IEP and are going through evaluation, one of the things that I want to make sure people that are watching, if they're not aware, just because they have a medical diagnosis does not automatically mean you qualify for an IEP. They have to have an impact in the learning in order to qualify. So just because a medical diagnosis doesn't mean they automatically qualify. So what I would say at this point is making sure, if you do have a diagnosis and you are concerned with the child's learning in the classroom, that you email the team and request for them to do a comprehensive evaluation. Now, that can't be done now because obviously school is out of session, but they can certainly start the process. I have seen some districts that have actually done outside providers starting that evaluation process. So having that communication now just gets the ball rolling. So have that communication with them, see what you can get implemented, and making sure you get in front of them right before school starts. Again, we don't know what school is going to look like in the fall, but if it is going to be face-to-face, we want to make sure that you have that process set in place. And once you have that, making sure, the biggest thing is I want to make sure the other component that is really important from the IEP is the parent input statement or the parent educational concerns. A lot of the IEPs, that area is usually in blank. That is the area where you as the parent have to put down your concerns, where you see your child. It's important to have that area. So again, now more than ever, that should be updated, especially because the kids have been out of school for 4 or 5 months.
And Wanda, I want to add to that. Our practice does a lot of evaluations for families, and we do work in collaboration with schools frequently to do testing. So for families that may be looking at this process, what we do when we're looking at some of these behavioral concerns for the academics, we can do some of the testing without teacher ratings, but we definitely value those teacher inputs. So we have some standardized measures that we use that to extract observational data that helps us with symptom presentation that we want to get from both parents and teachers. And that's tricky to do in the summer. Unless the teachers from last year are willing to provide that, which they aren't appropriate. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to wait until a later time, like October, when those new teachers get familiar with your kid. So it can be a tricky time, but like you said, Wanda, we want to document some of the behavioral concerns. The thing that we look at as clinicians when we're doing testing are those parent and teacher comments in IEPs that are existing. So if there's domains and previous discussions from the IEP team, as a clinician, I read those and I want to see what are the teacher concerns of this student and what are the parent concerns. So that's valuable data for us as clinicians to make diagnostic clarifications for your child. Can you speak, Wanda, to the process for families that might be looking at getting an IEP or pursuing an IEP for the first time? Because it can be overwhelming. There's a lot of jargon. We have sat in on meetings to help parents understand the process that they have to go through. And I think it's relatively similar, but it can vary from state to state. So when families are moving in from out of state, they might feel a little overwhelmed. How would you walk a family through if they're saying, I want to pursue an IEP special education? Wanda?
Sure. So the first thing, again, put the request in writing to the district, being that the school is out. The school district then has the 14 days to look at it. Then you will meet to get together to put a domain together. What areas, if an IEP, again, if it's a new student, they're going to have to do their own assessment. So again, because this all has changed, it just fluctuates a little bit. But typically the process is you will have a domain meeting, which are the areas that you're going to go through, cognitive, the functional, the academic, the vision, hearing, all of those areas, comprehensive assessment. Typically, when you do the request, you have 60 days to do the evaluation. Again, that is here in Illinois. All the states vary anywhere from 30 to 45. It really depends, but 60 days.
And that was the school-based evaluation, correct, Wanda?
That is correct.
The school is going to be doing an evaluation internally.
Correct. 60 days. Once the child, once the 60 days come up, you have a meeting, and that meeting is really to go over the results of that evaluation and if the child qualifies for an IEP. If it is that the child qualifies for an IEP, then there is within 30 days, you have another meeting, which is when you establish the IEP. So writing the goals, writing all of that information, just putting the IEP together. Once the IEP happens in 30 days, then the parent gets a copy and takes it home. And they have 10 days, and the school has 10 days before they can implement it. So if the parent has any concerns, questions, doubts, not sure, doesn't agree, within 10 days, they need to make that, whatever that it is, in writing. Because if not, the IEP is going to be implemented within 10 days. It's really important. And I say this often because we all get the paperwork and we put it back in the drawer. Mm-hmm. And then next year we go through for the IEP meeting, because you meet every year for an IEP meeting, but that does not mean that you can't have meetings throughout the year. Also, any changes that you're going to make to the IEP, you don't always have to have meetings. It really depends, but you can always have a written request and see if changes can be made. But the really important part of receiving the IEP is making sure that everything has been clearly documented. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned, Lisa, that as a clinician, the additional note section you read, it's really important, because that is one of the areas I emphasize. Yeah, I emphasize making sure that everything is documented in there. So if the family receives an IEP and they're like, well, we discussed XYZ and it's not written, email your team and say, we decided to do XYZ. Can you please make sure it's included in the notes? If you don't do it within 10 days, you're going to forget about it and it never happened.
Right.
It's
and
really,
a lot of times,
really
I would agree. And a lot of times I think parents don't understand when you go through the process and you just explain the domain meeting versus the IEP meeting, this process takes a good chunk of the semester.
For sure.
The data collection to happen. And I do think a lot of schools do a good job. I know parents get very anxious and they want me to do the outside evaluation. I say, you know what, let's see if you need it, because I don't necessarily replicate. And in some cases, we don't want to replicate tests that are already being administered. My personal preferences and my professional preference is always to be very collaborative with schools. And in some cases, when we are doing an evaluation at the same time, we try to communicate with the school collaboratively to not overlap data collection. So I'm really receptive to sharing our results with the school in the expectation that they're going to share theirs with me. So we work as a team together to support your child. And that's really the primary goal. I know Wanda's very collaborative in her educational advocacy efforts and works a lot with schools to really provide training and supports, not only to parents, but also to the teachers in the district.
Absolutely.
It really does take a lot of time to go through the IEP process. And just because you have an outside evaluation does not mean that the school is going to accept the diagnosis, that it's going to qualify your child for services, or that the school is not going to want to do their own version of the assessment. Right. So I think that's important to be mindful of.
Right. Really important, because I think a lot of parents think, I have an autism diagnosis, yeah, I automatically qualify. No, not necessarily. Now, if a child obviously has, say, a high functioning kiddo, it may not qualify for an IEP. The next step is request a 504, their accommodation. The biggest difference between an IEP and a 504 is the IEP is going to provide direct support related services. So speech, OT, PT, any special led direct minutes, pull out, push in. Whereas 504, is really directly to supports and accommodation. So the kid may need someone to read the test out loud, or they may need extended time, or they may need a quiet area. Any supports and accommodation is all embedded in a 504. In an IEP, I just want to make sure people know the IEP is very specific to related services. So if they don't qualify for the IEP, maybe that child can use some related supports and accommodations via a 504.
And I do think one of the things that I share with families, especially as kids get into middle school and high school, is the 504 accommodations are going to be more on the onus of the child. The child can refuse to leave the room for testing. They don't have to take that accommodation if they don't need it or they don't want it. But in an IEP, those services are contracted to be part of your child special education service plan, correct, Wanda?
That is correct. So when you write a lot of times, like the accommodations within the IEP, if it says, the child is going to get a break every 15 minutes, let's say, well, they're going to have to do that because that is what's written in the IEP. The IEP is the educational plan individualized for that child. So they're going to make sure. So now if we write as necessary or as needed, maybe there's a little more leeway. So making sure that you know the verbiage to use, making sure it's clearly defined, who's going to implement it. So again, it's just making sure. So yes, anything written in IEP takes place.
I hope that that's helpful to everyone that's listening in. I know that we get a lot of anxiety and questions from parents about the IEP special education process and the differences between 504s and IEPs. And I think it can be daunting. It can be overwhelming for a lot of families. Wanda, as we're kind of nearing the end of our time, would you provide a quick summary of how you support parents in their IEP meetings?
Sure. So as a parent myself, I basically will help the families behind the scene, attend meetings virtually, write letters, parent concerns, rewrite the IEP goals. So really my goal is to guide the parents through the process as a coach and an advocate. I never will give you legal advice because I am not an attorney, but I'm really here to guide you through that process and making sure. A lot of families don't know what they don't know. So if we don't teach them, sometimes it's just writing a letter, just putting some language in the letter that it really is going to get the attention and the support the child needs. So really it's just helping the families guide through the process. I'm hoping in the fall to launch a course to help families learn everything that I have learned. My goal is to really service the community and making sure that everybody can gain the knowledge so they can do and advocate themselves for their child. But really my role is guiding the families through this process because it is overwhelming. The other thing that I bring is a lot of times and I talk to a lot of people because on my page I get a lot of questions, it's taking the emotional component out of the whole equation. That is something that I can look as a factual. So when I look or speak to a family, I make sure that we're taking the emotional component, which could impact the way the meeting goes. So that's another way that I guide the families through this process.
Thank you, Wanda. And I know, Wanda, you offer your services in both English and Spanish.
That is correct.
So that's a very nice blend that you bring as well, that we all are I'm not able to provide that level of support. So I appreciate that you're doing that for families in the community. We do have a few minutes to take questions. I know we have a few viewers. We got a thank you from someone. So thank you for watching and I hope you find it useful. Are there any questions from anybody that's viewing today? And we'll take a minute to see. As we're waiting to see if any questions come in, Wanda, we will be presenting this. If anybody is viewing this after the recorded version and you have questions, please post them. We are going to be posting on, I'll make sure Wanda's material or contact information is available on the Facebook page, and you can ask questions to myself or to Wanda and we'll make sure we get back to you.
Yes. It's a trying times for everyone, and I just want families to know that we are here to give you the resources that we can. Ask the questions. Nothing is off the table. Nothing. So making sure that you guys know that just ask the question and ask for resources. And if anything I can do to help, I am here to support the families.
Great. I'm not seeing any questions come in, Wanda. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm very pleased to have you in our network, and we look forward to working with you throughout the year.
Thank you so much, Dr. Konick.
Take care.
Bye.
I just want to say, before we sign off, we do have another series coming up. Next week, we're going to be talking about sensory overload and sensory processing. We have an occupational therapist who will be joining us. So hopefully you'll sign in for those. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.